Welcome to Bookish Mind Podcast, Season 4, Episode 12. Today we uncover how the path of least resistance isn't just a natural tendency, but a powerful tool for shaping better habits through smart design. Here on the Deep Dive, we're exploring a really impactful concept, the law of least effort. We're drawing our insights today from a brilliant excerpt from Atomic Habits to understand, why we do what we do, and maybe more importantly, how to harness our natural inclination towards ease to build stronger habits for you.
That's such a crucial point. We often just assume willpower is, well, everything, right? The sole driver. But this deep dive, I think, will really show you just how profoundly your physical environment, the design world around you, influences your behavior. And this isn't about being lazy, not at all. It's about recognizing this intelligent, deeply wired energy conservation strategy that our brains have. We're built to seek the path of least resistance. It's just how we operate.
Okay, to really get us started on that, let's actually jump back in time a bit. There's this surprising historical example from anthropologist and biologist Jared Diamond. It's in his famous book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. He noticed something really fundamental. Continents have different shapes. Seems minor, right? But it had these monumental impacts on human development.
Oh, it's an incredible connection he makes, yeah. If you picture the Americas and Africa, their main axis runs north-south. They're sort of tall and thin land masses. Now, contrast that with Europe, Asia, the Middle East, this huge, wide, and fat stretch of land, mostly running east-west. And this basic geographical difference, as Diamond explained it, profoundly shaped how agriculture spread for centuries.
How exactly did a continent's shape impact farming? It sounds a bit abstract until you dig in.
Well, it's actually quite direct when you think about it. It was just way easier for agriculture to spread along those east-west routes. Think about it. Places along the same latitude. They generally share very similar climates. You get consistent amounts of sunlight, rainfall, similar seasons. So this meant farmers across Europe and Asia could, say, domesticate wheat or barley, and then grow those same crops successfully across that entire huge landmass, like from France all the way to China, relatively easily.
Right. But if you tried that going north-south, say in the Americas or Africa, totally different story, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. Traveling north or south, the climate just changes dramatically. I mean, just think about the difference between Florida and Canada.
Yeah.
You can't grow Florida oranges in a Canadian winter, no matter how you get a farmer you are. So to spread crops north-south, farmers constantly had to find and domesticate new plants every time the climate shifted significantly, a much harder task.
Okay, so the consequence of this seemingly small geographic detail was huge. Agriculture spread, 2 or 3 times faster across Asia and Europe? What kind of ripple effects did that have over centuries for those civilizations?
It's a massive ripple effect, and this global example, it just powerfully illustrates what James Clear calls the third law of behavior change in Atomic Habits. It shows our real motivation isn't always sheer willpower or, desire. It's deeply influenced by convenience, by ease. Over centuries, this difference compounded. Faster food production, that meant faster population growth. More people allowed cultures to build stronger armies, develop technologies more quickly. It really underlines that our brains are wired to conserve energy, often overriding what we think of as just pure motivation.
Which brings us right back to the law of least effort in our own daily lives. So what does this mean for us right now?
Well, the law of least effort basically states that when you're faced with 2 similar options, you will naturally, almost instinctively, gravitate towards the one that requires the least amount of work. Your brain is like this incredibly efficient machine. It's always looking for ways to conserve its precious energy.
So it's less about being lazy in that sort of judgmental way and more about being efficient with the energy we have.
Precisely. Every single action you take, big or small, needs energy. And the more energy an action demands, the less likely you are to actually do it, especially consistently. Think about aiming for, say, 100 push-ups every day. That's a huge energy output just to start. You might feel motivated for a day or two, but that massive effort, it gets exhausting fast. Now, compare that to the habit of doing just 1 push-up a day. That takes almost 0 energy to start. And the less energy a habit needs, the more likely it is to stick.
Right. And that really explains why so many of us find ourselves spending maybe too much time scrolling our phones, endlessly checking email, or just watching TV. They soak up our time precisely because they need incredibly low levels of motivation or effort. They're just remarkably convenient, aren't they?
Yeah, and here's maybe a helpful shift in thinking. Try seeing every habit not as the goal itself, but as an obstacle to the outcome you actually want. You want to get fit. Well, dieting and exercise are the obstacles. Want to feel calm. Meditation is the obstacle. Clearer thoughts. Journaling is the obstacle. The harder the habit, the bigger the obstacle, the more friction there is between you and that desired outcome. So the breakthrough idea is make the good habits so ridiculously easy that you'll do them even when you feel zero motivation.
Okay, that makes sense, but it does bring up a question for me. If we're all sort of wired for this least effort path, if we're lazy in that efficient sense, how do you explain people doing incredibly hard things like raising kids, starting a business from nothing, climbing Mount Everest? Those are definitely not easy.
That's a really fair question. And of course, you are capable of doing very hard things. We all are. But the reality is, some days you feel fired up, ready to tackle challenges. Other days, you just feel like giving in. We all have those days. And on those tough days, it's absolutely crucial to have as many things working for you as possible. The less friction you face, the easier it is for your, let's call it, stronger self to show up.
Yeah.
So the idea isn't to only do easy things. Definitely not. It's about making the things that pay off long-term as easy as possible to do in the moment.
Ah, I like that framing. It reminds me of that analogy, the garden hose with a kink in it. If you want more water, you've got two choices. You can crank up the pressure, try to force more water through. That's like trying to pump up your motivation for a hard habit. Lots of effort, lots of tension. Or you can just walk over and unkink the hose, let the water flow naturally. That's making habits simple and easy. You're removing the friction instead of trying to muscle through it.
Exactly, removing the kink. And one of the most powerful ways to remove that kink, to reduce friction, is through environment design. Now, we've talked about environment design before, like making cues for habits more obvious. But you can also optimize your environment to make the actions themselves much easier to perform. For instance, when you're deciding where to practice a new habit, it's almost always better to choose a place that's already on your daily path.
Right, so if I want to start going to the gym, picking one that's literally on my way to work makes a huge difference compared to one that's even just a few blocks off my route. Even those small detours can feel like massive barriers sometimes, can't they?
They really can. And even more effective, often, is reducing friction right within your home or office. Too often, we try to start good habits in what are essentially high-friction environments, like trying to stick to a super strict diet while you're out to dinner with friends, or trying to write a book in a chaotic house, or trying to concentrate while your phone is constantly buzzing next to you. We can actually strategically remove these friction points. And this insight, interestingly, was a total game changer for electronics manufacturers in Japan back in the 1970s.
Ah, right. I remember reading about this, how some big industries really transformed their efficiency using a similar philosophy.
Exactly. Japanese companies really focused on what they called lean production. They just relentlessly looked for ways to remove waste, any kind of waste, from the production line. This even included things like redesigning workspaces so workers didn't have to waste time twisting or turning to reach for their tools. Tiny movements, but they added up. And the result? Japanese factories became way more efficient, and their products, like TVs, were much more reliable than American ones at the time. In 1974, apparently, American-made color TVs needed service calls 5 times more often than Japanese ones. 5 times. And by 79, it took U.S. workers 3 times as long to assemble their sets. So by subtracting that wasted effort, they added customers. They added revenue. It's a powerful parallel for our own lives, isn't it? Removing friction helped us achieve more, often with less perceived effort.
It definitely shows how powerful it is for companies. But does this constant drive for ease ever have a downside for us as individuals? Like, are we maybe becoming too reliant on everything being frictionless, losing a bit of resilience maybe?
That's a really insightful question. And yeah, it probably points to a bigger conversation about finding the right balance. But purely for habit formation, companies are acutely aware of this principle. They are always looking for ways to shave off tiny bits of friction because they know it drives adoption, drives usage. Think about it. Meal delivery services, they reduce the friction of grocery shopping and cooking. Dating apps reduce the friction of making social introductions. Ride-sharing reduces the friction of getting across town. Even just text messaging reduces the huge friction of writing and sending a letter. And now voice-activated speakers like Google Home or Amazon Echo. A friend told me he got one mainly because it was just easier to say, play some country music, then pull out his phone, open the music app, find a playlist. You get the idea. Business, you could argue, is just this never-ending quest to deliver the same result, but easier.
And it's not just businesses, is it? Governments are using this too. There was that example that really shows the power of removing just one tiny step.
Oh yeah, the UK tax example. It's fascinating because the impact was so clear. The British government wanted to boost tax collection rates, so they made one simple change to their communication. Instead of sending people a link to a web page where they then had to download the tax form, they just sent a link directly to the form itself, just removing that single click, that one step. It increased the response rate from 19.2% to 23.4%. Now, for a country the size of the UK, those few percentage points mean millions and millions in extra tax revenue. So the central idea, whether you're thinking personal or for an organization, is design an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. So much of the battle in building better habits really comes down to finding ways to reduce the friction for our good habits. And importantly, increasing the friction for our bad ones.
That flows perfectly into this idea of priming your environment for future use. I find this incredibly practical. You mentioned Oswald Knuckles, an IT developer. He seems to have this down with his resetting the room strategy.
Yeah, he's a great example. He calls it being proactively lazy, which I love. So after he watches TV, he puts the remote back, fluffs the pillows, folds the blanket. When he gets out of his car, he takes any trash with him. While his shower's warming up, he quickly wipes down the toilet. And the point, he says, isn't just tidying up, it's preparing the space for the next action. He says everything is always in its place, ready to go. And it effectively gives him so much time back because there's no friction when he needs something later.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
It really is about setting your future self up for success. My wife does this amazingly well. She has this box with greeting cards already sorted. Birthday, sympathy, wedding, thank you. So whenever she needs one, she just grabs it and sends it. The friction of finding a card, buying one, totally gone.
Yeah.
Whereas I'll think, oh, I should send a card. And then, weeks go by because I haven't made it easy.
That's a perfect everyday example. And you can prime your environment in countless ways like that. Want to cook a healthy breakfast? Okay, put the skillet on the stove, get the cooking spray out, maybe lay out the plates the night before. When you wake up, boom, making breakfast is the easy path. Want to draw more? Put your pencils, notebooks, whatever tools you use, right on top of your desk within easy reach, not tucked away in a drawer. Trying to exercise more consistently. Set out your workout clothes, your shoes, pack your gym bag, fill your water bottle ahead of time. Want to improve your diet? Chop up a bunch of fruits and veggies on the weekend, put them in containers in the fridge. Makes grabbing a healthy snack super easy during the week. These are all simple, tangible ways to make the good habit the path of least resistance.
And then you can flip this, right? You can invert the principle to make those bad behaviors harder by deliberately increasing the friction.
Absolutely. It works both ways. So if you find yourself watching, say, way too much TV, try unplugging it after each use. Only plug it back in if you can actually name the specific show you want to watch. That little bit of friction can stop mindless channel surfing, if that's not enough. Okay, maybe take the batteries out of the remote each time, makes it just a bit more annoying. And if you're really serious about breaking the habit, maybe move the TV into a closet after each use. You'll only bother taking it out if you really want to watch something specific. The greater the friction, the less likely the habit.
I actually do something like this with my phone. If I physically leave it in another room until lunchtime, I honestly rarely even think about it. Just the friction of having to get up and walk to another room is enough that I won't do it unless there's a deliberate reason. And the result, I get like 3 or 4 solid hours of uninterrupted work most mornings.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example. And it's amazing how little friction is often needed to prevent an unwanted behavior. Simply hiding beer away in the back of the fridge where you can't easily see it might lead you to drink less. Deleting social media apps from your phone? Weeks might go by before you bother to download them again and log back in. Now look, these little tricks aren't going to cure a serious addiction. Let's be clear about that. But for many of us, just adding a small amount of friction can be the critical difference between sticking with a good intention or sliding back into an old pattern. Imagine the cumulative effect of making dozens of these tiny changes, living in an environment that's consciously designed to make good behaviors easier and bad behaviors harder.
It really feels like a potential game changer for personal effectiveness, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So whether you're thinking about your own habits or maybe how you parent or coach a team or even lead an organization, the big question seems to be, how can we design a world where it's easy to do what's right? It's about you. It's about redesigning your life so the actions that truly matter most are also the actions that are easiest to take in the moment.
Exactly. So just to kind of pull it all together from our discussion today, human behavior, by and large, follows this law of least effort. We naturally drift towards the easiest option available. So the key strategy is to consciously design your environment, your home, your office, your digital spaces, so that doing the right thing becomes as easy as possible. This means actively reducing the friction for your good behaviors, making those desirable habits feel almost effortless. And, just as importantly, increasing the friction for your bad behaviors, making those undesirable habits more difficult to fall into. And finally, remember to proactively prime your environment to make your future actions smoother and easier.
Okay, so now for a final thought for you, the listener, to take away and maybe mull over. Think about one small habit you'd like to change, either building a good one or breaking a bad one. Now, identify just one specific piece of friction in your immediate environment related to that habit. Can you either remove that friction for a good habit or add some friction for a bad habit? What might that single, simple adjustment actually set off? How could it start a positive chain reaction in your daily life?